The most dangerous tornado zone in America right now is not the Great Plains. It is not centered on Oklahoma or Kansas or the stretch of flat open land most people still picture when they hear the words Tornado Alley. It is a corridor running through Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, and Arkansas, and it has been quietly overtaking the traditional plains for tornado risk for more than a decade. Dixie Alley, a name meteorologists have used since the 1970s, is producing more violent, more deadly tornadoes than the region most Americans still associate with the threat. And the terrifying part is that this shift has happened almost entirely without the public safety infrastructure, the storm shelters, the manufactured housing regulations, the public awareness campaigns, catching up to match it. Today we are going to break down exactly what is going on, where it is most dangerous, and whether things could get even worse. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever personally experienced a tornado warning or seen a tornado firsthand? Tell me where you were and what it felt like. If you want to be the first to know every time something major happens, subscribe. It is completely free. A thumbs up also helps enormously. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one so the algorithm actually shows it to people who need to see it. Now, let us get into it. Let's start with the actual research behind this claim, because Tornado Alley is shifting has become a common headline over the past several years, and it's worth grounding in the specific study that started the conversation. A 2018 study published in the peer-reviewed journal Climate and Atmospheric Science by researchers Victor Gensini and Harold Brooks analyzed tornado report data from 1979 through 2017 and found a statistically significant decline in tornado frequency across the traditional central and southern plains, alongside a corresponding statistically significant increase. Across parts of the Mid-South and Southeast, the region meteorologists call Dixie Alley. That finding has been corroborated and extended by subsequent research using updated data through the 2020s, consistently showing the same directional trend: fewer tornado days over the classic plains corridor, more over the Mid-South. Here's why that shift matters so much more than a simple relocation of risk. The Great Plains, where Tornado Alley risk has traditionally concentrated, is flat, sparsely populated in many of its highest risk zones, and offers long sight lines that allow both trained spotters and ordinary residents to visually track an approaching storm from miles away. Dixie Alley is almost the opposite terrain profile. The region is hillier, more densely forested, and crisscrossed with valleys that block sight lines to an approaching tornado until it is dangerously close. To put that in context, a tornado that would be visible from 5 miles away on the open Kansas plains might not become visible to someone in rural Alabama until it is less than a mile out, cutting reaction time dramatically, regardless of how much warning lead time the National Weather Service provides through radar and sirens. Let's talk about the housing stock, because this is one of the most significant and least discussed factors behind the region's disproportionate death toll. The Southeast has a substantially higher concentration of manufactured and mobile homes than the traditional plains states, and National Weather Service fatality data has consistently shown that a majority of tornado deaths nationwide occur in mobile and manufactured housing, structures that offer dramatically less protection than site-built homes even in a moderate-strength tornado. Combine that housing vulnerability with Dixie Alley's tendency toward nighttime tornado activity, research from NOAA's National Severe Storms Laboratory has found nocturnal tornadoes are close to twice as likely to occur in this region compared to the plains, and you get the specific, compounding combination researchers point to when explaining why the Southeast's tornado death toll has outpaced the plains for over a decade, despite the plains still holding a stronger association with tornado risk in the public imagination. Scientists generally do not attribute this shift to a single cause, and it's important to be direct about that uncertainty. Researchers have proposed several contributing factors under active study, including a documented eastward shift in the position of the jet stream and associated wind shear patterns during peak severe weather season, changes in Gulf of Mexico moisture transport patterns, and broader shifts in atmospheric circulation connected to a warming climate. There is currently no scientific consensus definitively isolating a single dominant cause, and researchers caution that natural multi-decadal variability, similar in concept to the ocean oscillation patterns that influence hurricane activity, may also be playing a meaningful role alongside any climate-driven trend. What is not in scientific dispute is the observational data itself. The shift in where tornadoes are actually occurring has been consistently documented across multiple independent research teams using different methodologies and overlapping but distinct data sets. To put a number on the human cost of this shift, an analysis of tornado fatality data from 2010 through the early 2020s shows that Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee combined have recorded a higher total tornado death toll than Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas combined over the same period, despite the traditional plains states covering a larger geographic area and having a longer standing public. association with tornado risk. That statistic alone is the core of why researchers and emergency management officials have grown increasingly vocal about the disconnect between where the public still assumes the greatest tornado danger lives and where the data now shows it actually concentrating. If you follow severe weather news at all, the term Dixie Alley probably already rings a bell, even if the scale of what's shifted underneath it doesn't. The term was coined by researcher Alan Pearson in the 1970s, decades before the current data trend became this pronounced, originally used simply to describe the Southeast's secondary tornado climatology distinct from the plains' primary pattern. What has changed is not the existence of the region, it is the relative balance of risk between the two zones, with Dixie Alley's frequency and lethality now rivaling, and by some fatality metrics exceeding, the region that still dominates the phrase Tornado Alley in most Americans' minds. Let's talk about storm shelter infrastructure specifically, because this is where the practical gap becomes most visible. Oklahoma has spent decades building out one of the most extensive combinations of public storm shelter programs, above-ground safe rooms, and community storm shelter grants in the country, driven directly by the state's long-standing association with tornado risk. Comparable infrastructure investment across much of the Southeast has historically lagged, though several states, including Alabama and Mississippi, have expanded state-level safe room rebate programs over the past decade, specifically in response to the shifting risk data. Emergency management officials in the region have been explicit in public statements that public awareness, specifically residents' subjective sense of their own risk, remains the single hardest gap to close, since building codes and shelter grants can be legislated far faster than decades of regional identity around where tornado danger really happens can shift in people's minds. But here is the part that deserves real emphasis. This shift does not mean the traditional plains have become safe. Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas still experience significant tornado activity every year, and the Gensini-Brooks research documented a relative decline in frequency, not an elimination of risk. Scientists cannot accurately predict which specific region will see the most severe tornado activity in any single upcoming season, since year-to-year variability remains substantial, even within a documented multi-decade trend. What the research does support is a genuine, data-backed case for residents throughout the broader Southeast to hold the same baseline level of tornado preparedness that has long been considered standard practice in Oklahoma and Kansas, rather than treating tornado risk as primarily someone else's regional problem. Keep an eye on manufactured housing regulation updates, too, because that is one of the more concrete policy responses researchers and emergency managers have pushed for as the data has solidified. Several southeastern states have discussed strengthening anchoring requirements and expanding access to nearby community shelters, specifically for manufactured home communities, a direct policy response to the housing vulnerability data described earlier, though implementation and funding have varied significantly by state and remain an ongoing, unresolved policy discussion rather than a completed reform. The difference between a community that adapts to a genuine, data-documented shift in risk and one that continues operating on outdated assumptions is not luck. It is whether public warning systems, shelter access, and household preparedness habits actually update to match where the evidence says the danger now concentrates. NOAA weather radios, phone-based wireless emergency alerts, and knowing your specific shelter plan before a storm arrives matter just as much in rural Alabama or Mississippi today as they have long mattered in Oklahoma, a message public safety officials across the shifting risk zone have been repeating with increasing urgency. So what happens next? Researchers will continue updating this analysis as new tornado report data accumulates each year, refining the geographic boundaries of the shift and continuing to investigate the relative contribution of jet stream position, moisture transport, and broader climate patterns to the trend. Despite the genuinely significant and well-documented nature of this shift, there is currently no scientific evidence that it represents anything other than a real, ongoing redistribution of a threat that has always existed across a wide swath of the country, not a sudden new danger appearing where none existed before. Let's go deeper on the mechanics behind the jet stream shift, since that's the leading physical explanation researchers are actively testing. During peak spring severe weather season, the position of the jet stream and the associated wind shear it produces plays a major role in determining where thunderstorms are most likely to organize into tornado-producing supercells. Several research teams have documented a gradual eastward shift in the average position of this favorable wind shear pattern during March, April, and May, the traditional core of tornado season, over the multi-decade period covered by the tornado frequency data. Researchers are careful to describe this as a correlated pattern rather than a fully proven causal chain, since isolating the exact atmospheric mechanism driving a jet stream position shift from natural variability, ocean temperature patterns, and broader climate trends remains an active and genuinely unsettled area of research. It's also worth understanding how this connects to the timing of the shift within the calendar year, not just its geography. Multiple studies have found that the increase in Dixie Alley tornado activity has been concentrated disproportionately in the cooler months, specifically an expanding secondary tornado season running from November through February, alongside the traditional spring peak. That matters practically because it means southeastern residents now face meaningful tornado risk across a wider portion of the year than the single spring season most public tornado safety messaging has historically emphasized, another specific gap between the data and public awareness that emergency planners have flagged as a priority. Now let's talk about what emergency management agencies are actually doing in response, since the picture is not simply one of inaction. The National Weather Service has expanded its network of forecast offices and improved radar coverage across the Mid-South over the past 2 decades, and several southeastern states have introduced or expanded tax-free weeks specifically for storm shelter and safe room purchases, modeled on programs that originated in Oklahoma. Progress has been real but uneven, and officials in the region have been candid that infrastructure and funding still lag the pace of the underlying data shift, a gap that is the direct practical consequence of the trend this video has been describing. This is also a moment worth using as a genuine prompt rather than a scare. If you live anywhere in the Mid-South or Southeast, and especially if you live in a manufactured or mobile home, this is a reasonable point to identify your nearest community storm shelter. Make sure you have a way to receive warnings overnight, and treat tornado preparedness with the same seriousness that has long been standard practice further west, regardless of what the region has historically been called. We'll continue tracking this story as new research is published, and if updated data reveals further changes in where this risk is concentrating, we will bring you the details as soon as they are confirmed, not before. Let us go. See you in the next one.